back to another episode of Reinforce the Horse. Today we are here with Chris Nichols, and Chris has been working with and rescuing horses for close to 25 years. She is formally EAGALA certified as a horse specialist and has been horse-inspired growth and healing and horse-inspired psychotherapy since 2017. Chris is a founding board member and current president and executive director of the Medicine Horse Project, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the rescue of horses that have suffered abuse, abandonment, neglect, or are at risk of falling into the slaughter pipeline. In addition to the rescue, rehabilitation, and rehoming of these animals, the Medicine Horse Project partners these horses with people seeking hope, healing, and inspiration through their high and resiliency. Through horsemanship programs, the Medicine Horse Project operates on Chris and her husband Morgan's 80-acre off-grid ranch in rural northern Nevada.
Very cool. Oh, Chris, man, I think we're just going to have a lot of fun because just the name of your project, the Medicine Horse Project. But before we dive too deep, how about you just expand a bit on that if you wish? Let us know, kind of what ultimately brought you into the world of horses and tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, first, I want to say thank you so much for having me. It's such a joy to be asked to join you two. And I've been listening to your podcast, so I'm excited to be here and share with you my passion and horses and to learn more about the two of you too. I mean, this is just awesome. I, like a lot of people, I don't think I'm unique in this demographic, but I did not get into horses until later in life. I think I was almost 30 when I got my first horse, which I guess in retrospect at the age I'm at now, that's not later in life, is it? I retract that.
We don't want you to respond to that, Alyssa. That was not for you to answer.
Yeah, that was not for you, Alyssa. So as a kid, I lived near horses. My best friend in junior high had horses. And so I spent some time at the barn, but I never had one of my own. And it was something I always felt pulled to and drawn to, and happened to buy horse property that had a little horse set up. And I wanted to look at my horse and my new horse property and my new horse setup. I didn't know the spiral effect that would have on my life and the path that it would take me in the trajectory that just launched. But I got my first horse. He was a little Appaloosa, and he was just as afraid of me as I was of him. I mean, fear like I had never experienced before in my entire life. And it was humbling. It put me on a journey that led to addiction of learning and a quest to be the best I could be for my horses. And I think as we all know who go on that quest, it changed who I was as a person. When my son, who's now 31 or 32, when he was 9, he decided he wanted a horse of his own, and he wanted a Mustang. I think someone in Boy Scouts had a Mustang, and so he was like, I want a wild horse. And we were checking in with the BLM facility down in Ridgecrest. We lived in Southern California at the time, and just it wasn't finding what he wanted. And in a horse trade magazine, couldn't even tell you what one it was, he found a advertisement for a horse rescue that specialized in wild horses. So out we went. And when I walked onto that property, I knew in that moment, I even looked at the director and said, I think you will never get rid of me. And I'm supposed to be here. And my life is never going to be the same. And it hasn't. It absolutely hasn't. And it began a path that I couldn't be more excited that I'm on today.
That is beautiful. Can you tell us more about where you are now?
So now we're located in northern Nevada. And although we live in the desert, we've had thunderstorms every afternoon, I think, for 2.5 weeks. So we're very wet and we're very green right now. Very green. The Medicine Horse Project was founded in 2015, and it was kind of born of this concept from the other horse rescue that I used to be involved with. Our flagship program there was a wild horse gentling program where we took people from all walks of life over a 4-day period, and we put them in a round pen with a wild horse, and we taught hands-on wild horse gentling. What was happening was our focus was educating people on gentling wild horses. Every single time we did this, people were walking away with life epiphanies. Those horses were changing people. And it led to me becoming EAGALA certified and doing more programs. But that organization's mission was the rescue and rehabilitation and lifetime sanctuary of wild horses that needed a soft landing. And the programs and stuff weren't really what the mission of that organization was. And so born from that was the Medicine Horse Project, where we rescue horses, not necessarily all Mustangs, but it's what I'm known for. So it's what we tend to get calls for. And partnering those horses with people seeking hope, healing, and resilience. And I think that that's the biggest lesson that these horses have. Resilience is my favorite word. And I've learned it from these horses over these years. Horses that have come into our lives that have every right to not trust, to not bond, to, want nothing to do with a human being. They heal. And they give, and they connect, and they offer themselves on a level that is just mind-blowing. And as we work to release the trauma from the horses and set them up for long-term success, we're releasing trauma from humans. And it's that partnership and that relationship is powerful. It is absolutely powerful.
There's so much power in that I personally have felt. And so, I came into the horse world just only half a decade ago, and I was a completely different person. Plenty of people, our listeners, know that story, and this is about you. So I won't dive too deep there, but you mentioned when you stepped onto that initial sanctuary or that rescue that you went out to with your son, that you just kind of felt at your core that that's where you needed to be. Can you explain a bit more about that feeling? Was it just kind of a mental thought, or was it, deep inside your body, or how did that actually manifest itself?
It was an energy pull that was so dynamic, there was no resisting it. At the time, I ultimately became a volunteer, eventually became an employee, and eventually became vice president of that organization. Those horses spoke to me. I had never really been around horses that had such tragic stories. And there was something powerful to me. Well, first of all, this particular rescue was a ranch full of women, and seeing these women be uplifted and empowered to work with these animals, heal these animals, find them homes, get things built that needed to be built to house. I think when I got involved, we had 42 horses on 16 acres. When I left, we had 758 horses on thousands of acres. And just the power of community, and everyone on that ranch wanted to see every horse succeed and every person succeed. And the marriage of that was just powerful. It was something I wanted to be a part of.
Was the makeup of the staff just women? Was that by design, or was that something that just happened organically?
I think it happened organically. I don't think it was the intent. The executive founder and executive director is a powerful, incredible woman. Her trainer at the time was fantastic. She did have some ranch hands that were men, but they were kind of in the background, making sure fences weren't falling down and things like that. They weren't so much involved in the everyday aspects of rehabilitating the animals. So that was really sort of a tribe of really strong, powerful, and uplifting women.
And the reason I asked that is because, I was wondering if it might have been a certain group of women, or the idea was to bring the women out to help rehabilitate them from trauma or something like that, and then finding their way through with the horses. Or was it just horse centered from the get-go? And
it was just horse centered from the
Right.
get-go. Eventually, Medicine Horse Project, I think it was 2016 or 2017, partnered with that organization for a women's wild horse empowerment retreat. And it was their facilities and Medicine Horse's curriculum. And it became, I think we did that every year. Gosh, I think we did 5 or 6 of those. And many women returned every single year. And it was fabulous.
Can you tell us about a few horses maybe that stood out to you more than the rest for any particular reason?
Oh my gosh, over the years, there have been so many horses that stick out in my mind. Horsemanship is really humanship. It has nothing to do with changing or fixing these animals. They're pure and honest and perfect in every form and in whatever form they are in. It's learning and finding the change within you. And that's been the most powerful walk of my journey. Right now we have a horse. Well, we have several horses, obviously, but the one that sticks out in my mind today is a horse named Apollo, who's currently here on the property. We've had him for 2 years, I think, coming close to 2 years. Apollo came to us from an avenue that we as an organization don't generally like to engage in, and that is he came directly from a kill buyer. We have a livestock auction here, not far from here. It's about 130 miles from here. And it is just a meat auction. They don't tell you if the horses are geldings, stallions, mares. They don't tell you age. They don't tell you background. You don't know anything. It's just pushed through the sale ring, just like the cattle and the sheep and the lambs, and it's just a meat market. The only thing they tell you is what it weighs, because that's all anybody cares about. And there's one particular kill buyer down the street from there who usually gathers up all of those horses. We've tried and have on occasion outbid him and got them before he got them. But this particular horse, no one was at auction buying horses that day, and he bought this horse, and it was everything that's wrong with that industry. He is a BLM branded Mustang. Nobody verified whether or not this animal was titled until he was in our hands. And in fact, he was not titled. So what happened was the kill buyer panic offered him on a social media website for emergency need. He will ship to slaughter on Sunday if he's not bailed out. Well, the truth is he wasn't going to ship anywhere because he wasn't titled. They'd never get that horse across a border. So one of the women who had participated in our women's retreats saw him and knew that we were not far away. And she reached out and said, if I post his bail, would you go get him? Hesitantly, I said yes. And I say hesitantly because I don't like padding the kill buyer's pockets, which is exactly what happens when you are rescuing horses that way. Those are horse. You're not saving a horse from going to slaughter. That horse was never going to go to slaughter. He can't go to slaughter. But he was definitely a horse in need. And so he's here. He was, upon investigation, his story is a lengthy one. He was rounded up as a 2-year-old from Tonopah, Nevada. he was transferred to Ridgecrest, California, where he was processed, which we all know means he got branded, he got gelded, probably had his feet done, vaccinated. And then he was shipped off to a mobile or satellite BLM adoption where he was adopted and sent to a TIP trainer, which is a training incentive program. The TIP trainer, I'm sure you're familiar with that program. They have...
Yeah. And so let me just kind of explain that for our listeners. For those of you who don't know what the BLM or Bureau of Land Management TIP training program, it stands for Trainer Incentive Program. And it's basically a program that gets horses into the hands of people who will basically go through the very rudimentary basics of so-called gentling of a horse, straight out of the wild into domestic ownership. And the things that they focus on are being able to load in a trailer, being able to pick up all four hooves for trimming. What are some of the other ones, Alyssa? I know there's 4.
Halter and lead and
Haltering
touch all over.
and to touch them all over as like brushing. Now, it's been our experience, and just kind of a piggyback and a segue there, that I believe there's really great TIP trainers all over the country. I have no problem with that. But it's just, our philosophy doesn't mesh too well with checking 4 boxes really in a quick period of time. In our perspective, it's a little heavy for the horse. Let's just say it that way. That is the TIP training program.
I absolutely agree. And in 2009, I participated in the Extreme Mustang Makeover, and which is put on with the Mustang Heritage Foundation. And you have 100 horses, 100 trainers, and 100 days. And although it was a phenomenal experience, not all wild horses should be in that environment and should be gentled under those terms. And so it's like you guys, it doesn't really follow the philosophy for me. And not all TIP trainers are created equal. I can't say that this TIP trainer wasn't, but I can tell you the horses told me that his life prior to being here was not a positive one. So he went from a TIP trainer to his adopter who couldn't do anything with him. I mean, nothing. Couldn't do anything. And so having him at home on her property was not going well. And she sent him to a trainer here in Nevada. She was in California. And the trainer in Nevada, I can tell you that didn't go well either. And he ended up breaking the trainer's hand. And the trainer's story is that he put him in the pasture next door at his neighbor's house, and then the neighbor and the horse disappeared. And the reason why that even came up was because I called the BLM once the horse arrived here and to verify that he was titled, and found out he was not. And so an investigation took place where basically a BLM ranger investigator called the original adopter and said, "How's your horse doing?" And she said, "Fine." Well, the ranger knew the horse was in my yard. And the truth was, she had dropped it off in March at training in Nevada and had no contact with the horse or knew where he was. And it was like July, August. And she didn't know that the horse had gone through the livestock auction. She didn't know that he had been purchased by a kill buyer, and she had no idea that we were in possession of the horse.
I guess let's just summarize at this point what happens from a horse coming out of the wild. It's near and dear to our hearts because we have, Alyssa and I have personally 2 Mustangs out in our paddock as we speak. And the process, even if it's a great one, all things considered, the process of those horses coming out of the wild, I don't even think you can call it great because the way it starts. But even if there's no hiccup along the way and they have a great trainer right out the gate, so to speak, it's very traumatic. You mentioned stepping onto this sanctuary, this rescue, back when you first made your debut into the horse world, and you felt something within inside you. And then that ultimately changed the trajectory of your life. Your life's journey was altered as a result of that. Today, it sounds like you're very much an advocate for not only the horse in general, but wild horses in particular. It sounds like you've come to terms with a lot of traumas within your own life and perhaps even other people that you've come in contact with and healed through or with horses. Ultimately, all that just blows my mind still to this day, as I've only had 5 years working alongside of horses, but my own life has had a similar pathway. And the more we talk to people and uncover it, it sounds like they just have that way of being about them.
I think part of what I have discovered with these horses that have suffered trauma, whether it be abuse or neglect, or even like we just took in a senior horse that has lived his whole life on the same ranch. He was born there. His mom was there. His dad was there. His grandma was there. I mean, they had the whole line of horses for years and years and years. And now his horse owner is elderly and in a situation where she can't manage the ranch by herself anymore and has had to disperse her herd. He was been raised in a great deal of love, but his whole life just got flipped upside down, and he's in a new place with new horses, and his human is gone. There's a grieving process even for those horses, right? That even though there wasn't abuse or there wasn't neglect, their life has changed as a result of circumstances that were beyond their control. And there's a process in going through healing from that. A great deal of what we do here, and what is my priority with the horses, is allowing them to find their authentic self. So often, these horses have been trained to mentally, emotionally shut down and endure and tolerate rather than accept that, honestly, we untrain. We are training all of that out. And when they start bucking, rearing, kicking, I'm like, yes, now we can have a conversation. Now you're being honest with me about how you feel. Tell me your story. What do you need? And when they get that freedom of expression, everything changes. They discover they have an opinion and they can voice it, and they're not wrong for voicing it. And when people come into that environment and they go through that process with the horses of trying to pull out that authenticity, trying to pull out that truth, trying to get to the heart of how do you feel right now in this situation, it opens up the door for them to be honest with themselves and seek their authentic, what's going on in them. I'm in a place where I'm safe. I can voice my opinion here. I don't have to endure. I don't have to tolerate. I can be free, and I can be accepted, and I can be expressive and not judged. I mean, that's what it's all about. The horses are teaching people how to let go of that because they're letting go of it.
Oh, that's beautiful.
That touches my soul. That's like, that has been one of my major focuses with my 3 or our 3. It's, giving them that choice and seeing them come from, whether it was shut down or previously wild to, wow, I am a living, breathing being with an opinion. Here's my opinion. Here are my feelings. To be able to witness that is gotta be the best feeling.
We do a lot of our work at Liberty. I believe in the power of choice, and we teach a whole realm of workshops here in our Resiliency Through Horsemanship programs, outside of just our horse-inspired growth and healing programs. And I always say, when you take that halter and that lead rope off, what you're left with is truth. So why not just start from a space of truth? I have found when you give them that option of choice, they offer you far more than you could have ever dreamt of or even thought of. Sometimes I think, wow, I would have never even thought to ask you for that. And here you are giving it to me. That same horse, Apollo, he came in terrified of people, untouchable, unhalterable, literally quaking in his boots if he was near you. And I put him in the round pen, and his first instinct was, I got to get out of here. And he would try and jump out. We have, Mustang panels, so he's safe and secure. But he never looked in, right? That's another thing that's very metaphoric when you're working with people is a lot of these horses are wanting out. Well, a lot of these people are wanting out, but they don't know that the way out is to look within, right? So Apollo had to stop looking out and start looking within the round pen, because that's where the release was going to be. That's where the relief is going to be. That's where the connection is going to be. And he found that. And he had a huge moment where I could feel he wanted to lay down. I've seen horses get so jacked up on adrenaline that sometimes they they'll yawn, they'll roll their eyes, they'll stretch, but sometimes they need to lay down and roll it off. I got to get all this adrenaline and icky stuff off of me. And I could see he wanted to lay down. But, I'm a predator, and I was right there, and there were people watching. So there were predators all around the outside of the round pen. And he couldn't do it. So I thought, okay, I'm going to lay down. And he thought that was nuts. You should have seen him looking at me like, what is she doing? Why is she laying in the center of the round pen? And I finally rolled over. I'm very extroverted, and there's a lot of energy that comes off of me. So I thought, okay, I got to hone it in. And I laid on my belly, and I put my head like this and kind of shut my eyes and really concentrated on being centered in my breathing. And the next thing I know, I feel this huge rush of protection. I mean, there's no other way for me to describe what I felt other than it was a rush of protection. And I kind of looked out from underneath my arm, and this wild horse that was terrified and trying to jump out of this pen 10 minutes earlier had moved over and was standing over the top of me. And it was as if he was saying, you relax. I got this. I'm going to keep you safe now.
Wow.
And many people that I tell that story to tell me I'm insane, that I would let a wild horse that had shown that kind of behavior be so close to me when I was in such a vulnerable situation. But there was nothing but love and trust between me and that horse. I knew it, and I felt it, and it was going to be a new day from there forward. And we have had to go through an entirely re-gentling process, and we have great days and we have horrible days, but that's okay. That's part of growing. That's part of his growing. That's part of me growing. That's part of anyone who gets the pleasure of sharing space with this horse. It's lessons that he's going to offer us. And through those lessons, he's going to heal. We're going to heal. We're all going to learn. And it's a gift. It's a gift that I don't take lightly, and I cherish every opportunity. And every horse that comes through this gate is absolutely here for a reason. Whether it's to teach me something, or to teach our volunteers something, or to teach people who come in for our programs, every one of these animals has such a powerful lesson. In its core, to me, it's about resiliency. It is absolutely about the keys to how to become resilient.
What is resiliency to you?
Resiliency is about facing challenge and opportunities and adversity, and coming out the other side stronger, better, wiser, and more centered in yourself, just like these horses. The truth is, the only reason why a horse would come here is because a human has given up on itself. It's either given up on the horse, or it's given up on themselves. They've given up on their financial situation. They've given up on their health. We've seen a lot of horses come in here because of owner health. Those horses that have suffered abuse and neglect, at the core of that is a human that is in, trauma, and is being focused and directed to the animal. That is a human who's given up on themselves. And when you partner these horses that a human gave up on with a human that has maybe given up on themselves, and what comes out of the other side is just humbling, inspiring. I say that there are 4 C's to resiliency. Why I decided it was C's, I have no idea. It was probably a dream in the middle of the night that I woke up at 3 and said, they should be C's. And the first one, and this is the core of every one of our programs, the first one is communication. You have to communicate, right? And communication requires more than one person, or more than one animal, or more than one sentient being. So the first key to being resilient is to communicate. Some of us need to learn how to communicate effectively. The second is connection. If you're communicating, you're going to build a connection. I mean, if you're authentically communicating, connection is going to come from that. And when you're building a connection, it leads to the third C of resiliency, which is community. You've got to have a tribe around you. You've got to have a support around you. You've got to have those that lift you up and those that celebrate you. There's another C, celebrate. And the hardest one, the hardest C is congruence. What's going on in your mind and what's coming out of your mouth and what's happening in your body have to be aligned. And that is a really unusual thing for humans. We are so rarely congruent. And that's, I see, one of the most powerful lessons that I've learned with the horses is if you're not congruent, if what's going on in your mind, what's coming out of your mouth, and what's happening in your body are not aligned, you're confusing to the horses. The horses are like, I don't understand you. You need to fix that and come back. And so that's one of the most powerful lessons and I tell people when they're working with horses, don't talk. We have a hard enough time aligning 2 things and keeping 2 things congruent. Let's just remove our mouth and let's just work on our brain and our body. And when we get really good at that, we can start to incorporate language out of our mouths again. But let's just try and make it easy and limit it to 2 things we need to try and keep aligned. As horses are congruent. It's what they understand. Their energy, their instincts, their communication with each other. They say what they mean and they mean what they say when they say it.
Your 4 C's, like I really love how you broke that down and wrapped it into this term resilience. I'm a U.S. military veteran, and the military talks a lot about resiliency, both within the war fighting machine itself and for the family members back at home and the children and stuff like that. One thing that I always found difficult, or a difficult pill to swallow, so to speak, with regard to that type of resilience talk, was that it was often, if not all the time, externally centered. So it always focused on what's exogenous to the individual and then retroactively going and fixing those traumas, be it you were blown up in the war theater, or you've been away from your family, or what have you. And so you mentioned something earlier where you talk about going inner. And I think, as you mentioned these 4 C's, the communicate, connection, community, and congruence, what it sounds like you're saying is it all begins within, but our culture, our modern day cultures globally really have sort of cut that out. Whether you're talking Eastern, Western philosophy, it really doesn't matter. Globally, seems to me we've largely cut out the inner work necessary to get into that congruent state.
I agree. I absolutely agree. Thank you for your service. My brother was a combat veteran, and we have a program here at the Medicine Horse Project called Awakening the Resilient Hero, which is a veterans program, and veterans are very near and dear to our heart. I think as adults, probably not so much for your tender, sweet age, Alyssa, you are always in a space of learning. You are comfortable in a space of learning. There's this transition that takes place as we become adults where we get to choose the situations and sometimes getting outside our comfort zone which is the only place you learn, it's just too easy to not. It's too easy to say, that doesn't feel real cozy and comfortable, and I'm going to stay in this nice little bubble. And in this nice little bubble, there's no growth. And I think we as a society have become comfortable there. But like you said, there's no inward look. There's no authenticity in that. There's no growth in that. There's a lot of superficial, external rewards to not doing it. But at the same time, diving into one's trauma and diving into letting go of those things has also kind of become a badge people want to wear. You know, I'm working through my trauma, and it's almost like they want to put it on a name tag. Here's my trauma. Here's my trigger. And it's critical and important to own your trauma and to know what triggers you. But there's also a level of responsibility that we have to take of doing the work inside. Hey, I've had trauma in my life, and now I'm going to own that trauma. I'm not going to wear it as a badge because the trauma doesn't define me. The trauma is something that happened. It's not who I am. I'm going to do the inward look. I'm going to find my authentic self, the self that existed before the trauma, and I'm going to move through it and look forward and not backwards. That's something that happened. I'm going to acknowledge it happened. I'm going to sit with it. I'm going to shake its hand. Say, hi, how you doing, trauma? You don't define me. You are something that happened to me.
And would you say then that being in a true congruent state ultimately requires one to more or less let go of trauma?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I want to make sure I'm not downplaying anybody's trauma. Trauma is real. We all have it. But what I don't want to see people do is use the trauma as an excuse or as a label. One of the biggest disservices we do to these horses is label them. We had an incredible animal come through here. His name was Braveheart. And Braveheart was a phenomenal horse that was put into a situation where he was taken to a weekend clinic. He was in a covered arena with horses he didn't know, people he didn't know, in a situation he had never been in during a thunder and lightning storm. He bucked for 3 seconds. He did not buck his rider off. He finished the weekend in glory, and it was fabulous. His owner's wife said he's a bucker and you can't have him anymore. He's not a bucker. So now here's this horse that's got a label on him, then surrendered to a rescue, and his whole life turned upside down because he expressed a moment of fear in a new situation that was outside of his comfort zone and didn't have the support to work through it.
You know, this brings up a really important thing that just came up yesterday. I had an epiphany. We're inside our house and we built a cob house. So it's got 2-foot thick earthen walls.
Oh, wow.
Right. And just to put into perspective, because outside it was really, really windy. We get a lot of wind here. So the wind gusts yesterday were, 20, 25 mile an hour wind gusts, which is typical for this time of year. So we have 2 pit bull puppies, and one of them, in fact, is Alyssa's. Her name is Ginger, and Ginger gets really nervous when it's windy outside. It just occurred to me that a lot of people probably have no idea. Even horse people, it seems, are not willing or able to translate those types of expressions from a horse, but yet we do it all the time with smaller animals, especially our smaller, domestic cats and dogs and such. So there's just something that kind of illuminated that whole thought of like, well, a lot of people say, horses don't have feelings, or they can't be expressive because they're dangerous or something like that. So
yeah, just because they're big, like they're a lot of them are 1,000 pounds or over, slightly under. They're big. They could literally kill us in an instant because of how big they are. And I think largely where that comes from in the human world is because we are afraid of them.
Yes.
Which is one thing I don't understand because I've never been afraid of them, but it seems like largely we go to like shut them down and force them and make them not show or make them feel like they can't show their feelings and expression because we are afraid of them.
Well, just think about this. That's brilliant, Alyssa. Their fear is very weird, very real in the horse world, and it's often something we don't ever talk about. And actually, we have a program called Breaking Through the Fear, and we hold it. We acknowledge it. We look at it. We define what kind it is and how do we move past it. Because most people don't want to talk about fear in the horse world. But let's look at Braveheart for a second, who's now, after 3 seconds of bucking, been labeled a bucker. Now, if I told everyone who came here to spend some time with Braveheart or meet Braveheart or work with Braveheart, whether it was to volunteer, adopt, or whatever, and I said, this is Braveheart, he's a bucker, everything they do moving forward is going to be different with Braveheart than if they didn't know that. Right? So that label that really doesn't define Braveheart. I mean, I think he was 9 years old. So in 9 years, he bucked for 3 seconds and now he's labeled a bucker. Right? And that happens in human lives. We have these traumas, experiences, adversities that sometimes we do it to ourselves, right? We label ourselves these things that were moments, blips on a radar, not a whole picture. So everyone is now going to approach this horse differently. They're going to be apprehensive, right? They're going to probably not be congruent in their body because their brain is going to be telling them, I need to do this, but their body and their energy and their heart rate is going to be feeling something else because they're wondering, is he going to buck? Is he going to do bolt? Is he going to do these things that he's been labeled? And on the horse's end, he's feeling all that incongruence, not understanding why it's there because he doesn't understand that he's been labeled a bucker, right? He just knows this thing happened and now people treat me different and now I have to go somewhere different. Labels on us, on the horses, on your dogs, on any sentient being is such a disservice because it's not authentic. In our women's retreat, as one of the first things that I ask women to do is take a piece of paper and write down every label and assumption someone has made of you that you have allowed or not allowed to add to the definition of who you are as a person. Let's write it down on a piece of paper and let's throw it in the fire. Let's get rid of it. That is not a burden you need to carry. And that's not a burden that these horses need to carry. When horses are surrendered to us and everybody wants to tell us all their dirty laundry about the horse. It did this, it did that. I try to tune it all out because it really doesn't matter. We learned early on in horse rescue that usually all the issues that those people have, we don't have because we're not the people. So we all know it's very rarely a horse issue. It's usually a people issue. And I want the horse to tell me. I want to spend quality time with the horse, be present in the moment, and have that horse tell me, hey, this is what I need moving forward in a horse-human relationship. In order to partner, I need this. I don't want to do that, but I enjoy doing this. I would rather the horses reveal themselves to me than me take on their labels and the assumptions that people have made. And maybe not see their authentic self because I have that propaganda and garbage in my head. I don't even want it. And we owe it to ourselves as humans to do that too.
Most definitely. How have horses communicated with you the strongest? What's their most like prevalent way of communicating with you?
For me personally, it's all about energy. I feel them in the core of my soul, and I feel for them. I feel of them, and sometimes that communication comes through in pictures. Sometimes I feel like they're telling me a story in words, but in its core, I absolutely believe that it's about energy, and it's about us coming together and really being present in the moment, which is not an easy thing for me. I have a big life. I'm the executive director of a nonprofit. I have a job outside of here to support, our personal lives. And I have a big life. We live off grid, which, as you know, is a lot of work. I mean, it is a lot of work. I always say, people say, how do you do it? And I always say, oh, it is so easy. Well, ask my husband. He's the one who does all the work. And what he has built out here is absolutely phenomenal. But it's really being present and giving myself, and in return, receiving of them. And sometimes those moments, those energy exchanges, it's so overwhelmingly emotional. And it's a powerful experience to lose yourself in that moment. It's a gift.
I think I know exactly what you're talking about. So there's many paths up a mountain to its peak, and what I found, there's so many different pathways to that one central point. Is there any particular practice, spiritual practice that you consistently follow, be it yoga or meditation or anything like that helps bring you into that awareness and congruency in your own self and with the horses?
So I do have a practice, a big meditator, I believe in the power of prayer. I also love moving meditation. So what I do often is I will walk, and instead of shutting out the thoughts that are coming, I'm specifically seeking a theme. Is the things that are coming into my mind, is there one certain theme that keeps popping up? Because that might be something that I need to address. And I try to kind of hold it, take a look at it, either put it on a shelf and say, I'm going to come back to you, or hey, this is how I feel about this certain issue or this item, and go into the horse arena when I come back from those walks. I'm present here. I'm not thinking about what needs to be done in the office. As being very rural, our volunteer base is very small, and we go through phases like a lot of nonprofits where we have lots of volunteers and we have no volunteers. And sometimes it is just Morgan and I out here. And so if I'm out there working horses, there's no one in here fundraising. There's no one in here doing the administrative stuff. Or if I'm in here doing this, there's no one out there doing that, or mucking pens. So the horses have really taught me that when I come into the pen with them, the other stuff has to not matter. And I need to be in the pen with them. And I had a great, I know you have done a podcast with Alicia Main, and she is phenomenal. I love her. And she has done some very powerful distance work on Apollo. And we were doing some follow-up video and documentation of his progress post his first assessment. And we were in the round pen together, and Apollo was just sort of all over the place. And I'm filming for Alicia, and I think we were on Zoom and we were talking. And all of a sudden, I realized I had a very hectic day and was working in this Zoom call with Alicia. And the issue wasn't Apollo. The issue was me. And Apollo was all over the place because I was all over the place. And there was this energetic of me going, Apollo, check yourself. And I swear that horse cocked his eye and looked at me and said, check yourself. Okay. All right. Let me fix me for a minute. And then we'll come back to this. And I'm going to be here, solely here. And I'm going to let go of that. I'm going to let go of that. I'm going to let go of where I need to be in 20 minutes. And I'm going to be here. And I'm a mover and a groover. I got things to do. So the lesson of here now is one that has been a challenging one for me, but probably the most important one for me.
That is very inspiring. You're a very inspiring person. Like, this is incredible. So
you're so sweet.
Thank you for sharing that. Speaks to my inner soul.
It's the horses. The horses are the inspiring ones.
They really are, but there are, and I guess I'm coming to notice that there are a lot more people that see that than what I give the world credit for. Mm-hmm. And this podcast, I'm grateful to be doing this podcast because it brings us closer to people like you that see them as beings that have a teaching purpose for us. Dad, what was the word you used the other day? Two-legged primates or something? We were walking around and one of our Mustangs, our newest Mustang, was looking at us, and Dad was like, she's looking at us like, you two-legged primates are weird or something along those lines. And it was like, yeah, so
here comes those crazy humans again.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. I do 100% agree. And
so it seems like we lost Alyssa to some technical difficulties, Chris, but you've shared so much, and I'm grateful for the time that you've been able to spend with us. Is there anything else that you would just like to share as far as like your message, or to kind of bring everything together and summarize?
I think one of the most powerful lessons I've learned from these horses is when you're with them, to leave all the ego and everything you think you know at the gate and be present in the moment. And I went on this quest many years ago to learn how to speak the language of equus. And I was going to communicate with horses in a language they understand. But through that process that I worked very hard at, I forgot to listen and discovered that my horses were absolutely screaming at me. And to take that step back and really listen to the feedback that's coming back from the horses. And before you try to change them, change you. Change something within you, whether it's your energy, the way you're asking, the way you're feeling, the way you're thinking. Change you and see if you don't end up with a different horse in front of you.
Oh, that's fantastic. And like I said, we could go, that just opens up, a whole nother rabbit hole for sure. A good one at that. There's been so much change that I found personally just by doing that. And the horses have been my companion in that process. And it seems the more Alyssa and I dig into that together, and even as a family, we just that urge to get within ourselves and to understand who we truly are really helps us to connect with ourselves and them. So I appreciate that so much. Where can people find you? And we'll definitely put links to, your website and stuff, but is there do you have a preferred method for people to reach out to you if they wish?
You can always reach out to me via email, which is info@medicinehorseproject.org. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram. And, of course, always visit our website, which is www.themedicinehorseproject.org.
All right. And we'll definitely put links out to those, to your website and to your email via the show notes page. And we'll also be sharing a bit about you on social media so that we can help spread your message and your mission. And we do thank you so much for joining us today. And hopefully we can have you back sometime in the not too distant future to go into more detail, and hopefully Alyssa won't drop off in the technical snafu world.
Oh, Jason, thank you so much. And please tell Alyssa I said thank you too, because it's been an honor to listen to your podcast. And I appreciate the messages that you're putting out there with how powerful these horses can be and how the relationship can make your life better. And I just so appreciate the father-daughter aspect of what you're doing and the message you're putting out there. And the world needs more of you, of the two of you. So keep doing it and do more.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate you.